Hello, welcome back to the channel. Glad you could join me. The last book review I posted was a Doctor Who book. Don't know if anybody that has been watching these is interested in Doctor Who, but anyway, going on. The commenter asked if I had read any Anne McCaffrey books, and I have. I haven't read a lot of them, not that I didn't like them. At the time, it was hard for me to get a hold of them. They were fairly popular when I was younger, and so it was somewhat difficult to get my hands on those books at the library. They were always being checked out. Anyway, the one that I remember the best is The White Dragon. Picture here on the screen. And it's hard for me to do the review because it has been a long time since I read this particular book. I remember that I very much enjoyed reading this book, and there was a lot that was going on, a lot that was new to me because I hadn't read any other Anne McCaffrey books at the time. If I remember correctly, I didn't even realize this was the third book in the series, and so when I ended up reading it, I remember that that I was somewhat confused on some of the terminology, some of the things that were going on, that kind of stuff. So, like I said, it's a bit difficult to know exactly how much to include and how much to exclude from this review because there's stuff that I have gleaned over the years and stuff that I picked up from reading later books in the series. I actually do realize that I need to go back and read the first two books because I never have read those ones. So anyway, The Dragon Riders of Pern, that's the overarching series that The White Dragon is from. Humans came to the planet Pern from Earth, and when they got there, there was a lot of things that were difficult about surviving on the planet. And one of the things that they discovered upon colonizing this planet was that there were these tiny flying lizards. They were called fire lizards. These lizards had the ability to teleport, basically, and breathe fire, which came in handy because the settlers at the time were able to, from them, engineer dragons that were capable of carrying humans in flight, that were capable of telepathic communication with their rider. The dragons, when they were born, the dragons would choose who to bond with, and they would bond telepathically with that person. Now, as I said, there were a lot of dangers. One of the things that was very dangerous about living on Pern was a phenomena called threadfall. During threadfall, these spores would fall out of the sky and would consume any organic matter that they touched. And so in fighting this particular threat, they found that fire worked very well. And so they engineered the dragons to be able to combat this particular plague. As it's coming out of the sky, they breathe fire, it destroys it, and they're good to go. Well, the two main characters of this book are Lord Jackson and his dragon, Ruth. Ruth is the white dragon of the story. Now, having no knowledge of Pern or the Dragon Riders or any of this before this, the white dragon, who cares? Well, the thing is that dragons aren't supposed to be white. Ruth happens to be an oddity, a mutation that's not typical of the dragons. And in fact, he's also small for a dragon. Most of the other dragons are much, much bigger than Ruth is. But Ruth managed to impress, and that's the terminology they use when a dragon forms that telepathic bond with their rider. He impressed Jackson. Now, usually, this would mean that Jackson would be a dragon rider. But because of his station as the heir to a holding, and because they didn't actually think that Ruth would survive very long, he was allowed to keep his title and was not forced to become a dragon rider. That and the fact that they didn't think that Ruth would actually be able to fly. He was undersized. And so there's a lot going on with this kind of thing. Now, I'm probably, as I said, bringing too much into this. I found myself very much empathizing with and identifying with Jackson and Ruth, especially, possibly because at that point in time. Now, this is a much older book. It was first published in 1978, so it's been around for a while. But I remember reading it when I was in my teenage years, which Jackson was a teenager in this particular book, if I'm remembering my story and timeline and all that correctly. Now, I did try to do some research to review, but unfortunately, on a lot of websites and stuff, they give you the entire overview of all of the things that have happened to the dragons and their riders and Pern history and stuff. And so it's somewhat difficult to say, okay, this part took place in this book, but this other part took place in this other book. And one of the things that I do remember about this book that you find out, so one of the things that they try very hard to do, or I should say try very hard not to do, because of all the problems that can happen. So the dragons have inherited this ability from the fire lizards that they were created from, to basically teleport. They go into a place called the Between, and if the dragon and the rider try, they can actually travel through time as well, but they try very hard not to do it because you don't want to set up a paradox where you meet yourself and things like that. Well, Ruth has the very unique ability to know when he is in time. So he always knows when he is, and he's very careful about not bumping into himself, as the saying goes. Whereas the other dragons, they may have this ability to travel through time, but they don't have Ruth's ability to know when they're going and when they need to be. So it's much more dangerous to go through time for other dragons and their riders than it is for Ruth. Ruth has that very special ability, and he uses it at one point. There's a dragon egg that gets stolen. Now, the dragon eggs are very important to the people of Pern, especially the golden dragon eggs, because the golden dragon eggs can become queens, or they are going to become queens. Queen dragons. And one of these eggs gets stolen, and the fire lizards, they really like Ruth for whatever reason. Ruth thinks it's because of his size, that he's not as big as the other dragons, and so they like him more. But they start accusing him of stealing the dragon egg. And he's like, I didn't steal it. What are you talking about? Well, it comes to find out that he actually does steal it. but he steals it from the people who stole it in the first place to get it back. So it's one of the amusing little anecdotes in the story. Now, I very much enjoyed The White Dragon. The world building and things is interesting. I'm much more of a fantasy type fan than this kind. This kind has that blend, but there is a lot of science fiction involved because the Dragon Riders, they're not just living on some world that happens to have dragons. They were actually humans from Earth who went out into space and ended up on this planet, and using technology, they created the dragons. So, not really my usual thing, but a very enjoyable blend. And I very much enjoyed, some of the follow-up. I do recognize that I need to go back and read the first couple of books in the series, and when that will happen, I have no idea. But I hope to be able to do that. Anyway, that's it for today. Let me know what you thought. Like, subscribe, put the bell on so you get notified when I release new videos, and enjoy what you're reading.